had a friend who was collecting pictures of the Holocaust, and he was interested in the degradation of the people. And when he told me that, I suddenly realized that was exactly the opposite of what I was looking for. I didn't know what I was looking for. It was an intuitive choice. But after speaking to him, I understood that there was a major difference between our interests.
Last year, my family and I visited Yad Vashem in Israel, and we were looking at all the pictures, and of course they chronicled the horror that went on there. Then I approached one picture. It was like a family portrait. The grandmother was holding the child. The parents were standing around the grandmother, and they had a look of readiness about them. They didn't have a look of anguish. And that's what I see in your pictures, in your tapestries.
Well, it's just more universal than catastrophe, you know, which is so arbitrary in a sense.
You said a word, universality. How universal is your work? Or do you think it's more Jewish in nature, more
I get
Gentile?
response from many people. Well, I've had strangers come up to me and either scream at me because they didn't expect to see this where I showed it, as, for example, at a craft fair in Dallas. And I've had other people, strangers, come up and weeping and just kiss me and walk away, and I have no idea who they are.
Huh.
You know, so it certainly gets response.
10 years on the subject of the Holocaust. What does that do to Muriel?
I don't know. It's some sort of mission that I have to complete. I'm at a point now where I know that I want to round it off. I want to find a few more masculine images. I don't know when I'll feel it's complete as a statement. I don't know if I'll ever feel that way, but I'm assuming that I will reach a point where I will complete this series and start something else.
What is the statement to you?
What is it? It's something that has to be done, and I have the skill to do it, and I have to do it. It's a compulsion, perhaps.
What if no one saw that?
I
What
don't
if you
think
did
that
it
makes
just
any
for
difference.
yourself?
That doesn't make any difference.
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't make any difference. I do them because I want to do them. I love the people I find in them.
Have you done a lot of reading on the Holocaust?
I've done some. I've done a lot of research more than reading, but I've done some reading.
Is doing this a catharsis?
I don't think so. I really think it's just something very intimate to me. I grew up in an anti-Semitic neighborhood, two different anti-Semitic neighborhoods. I grew up at the time when the war was beginning. Mm-hmm. My parents were immigrants from Russia, and I felt that had they not come to this country when they did, I would have been caught in the same thing as everybody else was in Europe. We also lived in Union City. There was an active German-American group, and I remember the swastika banners hanging outside of their beer hall. And my father was a Jewish grocer in a German neighborhood. So there was and then later, after his death, we moved to a community that was between a public school and a Catholic school, and I dealt with a different kind of anti-Semitism there. So it's just part of my heritage, and I was never sheltered from it. And then to learn about these atrocities just was an extension of what I already knew.
Of course, you can't compare what the
right.
people went through and what you went through, and yet you're saying, look, I survived all that anti-Semitism, and here I'm just going to show you, and I'm going to make these tapestries and see that we survived.
I never said
and they
that
did it
to
too.
myself. I never felt that way, but that seems to be what sort of happened. That I just couldn't walk away from it. I couldn't walk away from it.
Muriel, I understand that you couldn't start your tapestries on this specific subject matter until after you suffered a personal experience. Tell us what that personal loss was.
It was the death of my mother.
What is the connection?
Well, I felt in many ways my mother had always been a victim, and she could never get away from it. And I was afraid of, the major connection was not that. The major connection was facing her death. It was very threatening, it was very painful, it was anything you can imagine it to be, a tremendous shock and loss. She died suddenly, without any warning. Mm-hmm. And when I went to take care of the burial and saw her and touched her, I felt the fear was gone. The whole idea that I had about working on the Holocaust had been suppressed for several years. And dealing with her death, I lost the fear of death, and I knew that I could do the research. Before then, I was afraid to even look.
After working on such a harsh subject for such a long period of time, did it affect you personally, and in what ways?
They were tenderizing, if anything. They were not hardening. You can't live with these images and the photographs without being really touched. And they made me feel closer to the subject rather than hardened by the horror of it.
Muriel, you must have been influenced by the Nobel Prize-winning poet Nellie Sachs. I see there's an entire display here on some poetry and intaglios that you created for the individual poems.
Well, I was given a gift of her book of poems, Oh, the Chimneys, and it was very beautifully worded, beautiful, maybe abstractions of the Holocaust, but nevertheless very beautiful imagery was created by her words. And when I went back to school at one point to learn printmaking, and I started working on a print that was related to the Daughters of Auschwitz tapestry, to one of the figures in the tapestry. It was a portrait that I was working on. And I made some variations of that single head in class, and began thinking about one of her poems, which was the lead poem of the title poem of the book, Remnants of Despair, the poem Oh, the Chimneys. And that's when the idea began to creep into my mind that maybe I wanted to make these prints an homage in some way to Nellie Sachs. And one thing led to another, and I have a training as a graphic designer. I haven't been really using that in the direct sense of the word. And all of it came back, all the education came back, and I began to feel that I really wanted to do this right, to make the whole book, not just the prints and the poems, but actually design and have made the bindings. And I took some money that I had from one of the first purchases of the Holocaust work and turned it all into the project, and came out with Remnants of Despair.
I would like to read an excerpt of one of Nellie Sachs's poems, which personally moved me. It's called Chorus of the Rescued. We the rescued beg you, show us your sun, but gradually. Lead us from star to star, step by step. Be gentle when you teach us to live again, lest the song of a bird or a pail being filled at the well, let our badly sealed pain burst forth again and carry us away.
Yeah, I found that poem to be incredibly beautiful, and we couldn't leave it out even though it was extremely long, and that really is what set the size of the book, the large size of the book, because of that poem. And it's why I designed the image the way I did. It's an image that has a sort of mask in front of the face, that the real feelings, everything is still underneath and covered up, and with too much pressure or pain, it could burst forth again.
Why did you do them in black and white?
Oh, I thought that was very important. They had to be very stark, and they had to be very strong. It didn't need this. It was a different medium than tapestry, and I wanted to treat it, give it the respect that that medium commands. That medium is a black and white medium primarily.
Let's get to some of the tapestries. Could you tell us about Deportation?
Well, it's the most recently completed work. It was just finished last week. And it was very, very time-consuming because of the chain link fence imagery that goes across the whole surface. And that means that you can't make any quick passes of color back and forth and build it up quickly. You're constantly interrupted by edges, and you can have to fill in this little one and this little one. So it was time-consuming, and it was complex. It shows a little girl, maybe 11, maybe older, a year or so, or younger, and she's at the fence watching someone she loves being taken away. And there's some clothing of larger figures, adults near her in one corner, and in the other corner there's a hand from someone else behind the fence with her that's pressing, but it's such a dramatic hand, it's very much like something else that appears in historical art, and that's the expulsion from paradise, where the angel comes down and puts the hand up, and Adam and Eve are sent out of paradise. Mm-hmm. And that has come up in other art in the past, and I didn't want to necessarily deal with this image, but the more I looked at it and the more I was aware of the things in it, I felt that even though it was going to be very hard to weave, it had to be done. So that's how, every image that I do find that reaches me or talks to me that way, I seem to do the same thing. I resist at first, and then I yield and go with it.
It has to overwhelm you.
I think so. I think so.
Muriel, explain Ghetto Child in the Stroop Report.
Well, it was the same. I mean, the picture that's here in the exhibition shows you that he's part of just a whole group. He's commonly used because he is standing separate and he can be isolated from the group. So there have been many posters made by, within the Jewish community using this child. And I didn't want to use that because he was a familiar image. But I couldn't get away from it. It was the same some sort of emotional tie came in, and I just had to do it, so I went ahead with it. I have some feelings of maybe wanting to do the whole group sometimes. It isn't all pictured here. There's more. There's a little girl hanging onto her mother's coat on the other side of the image. And it's not in the photograph I have here at the gallery, but it's there. I can get it. And I may yet want to do that whole group of people. I just don't know yet. I'm still, though, looking for some more images of men.
Is there a relationship between you and any one of these tapestries?
You can't spend months and months on them, or hours and hours and hours on them and not feel tied. They're not mine because they're universal, but they are mine because I made these particular references.
When you let go of one,
it's like sending a child away.
Oh,
it's very hard.
Is your theme and the dedication to that theme an extension of your Judaism, or is it the center of it?
I'm not sure I know. I'm not sure. I don't think it's the center. I think it is an extension. I'm not sure, though. I'm not sure that they're inseparable. I mean, I don't know.
Who are you making these for ultimately? Who buys your works?
I make them for me.
Do you have any stipulations regarding them?
Only that the tapestries be in public places and not hidden away.
Why is that?
The first one that was sold in Dallas, and I wasn't prepared for it to sell. And the man kept it in his home for several years, which upset me, because that's when I realized that I did have some rationale in that I didn't want it in someone's home, and that I wanted it to be more public than that. And it's not to be noticed, or it just belongs in a public space as far as I'm concerned. It's not a private issue, it's a public issue. So he finally gave it on indefinite loan to the Center for Holocaust Studies at Dallas, and that's where it is now. And so I'm now making a larger than tapestry painting and life-size figures of the same image, because so many of my works are related to the image. I would like to hang on to that painting when I show those works, like all of the remnants of despair are related to one head in the Daughters of Auschwitz tapestry.
Muriel, I'm sure you're familiar with the adage, art is in the eyes of the beholder. And yet it seems as if you're directing your beholders to certain exactitudes. On your tapestries, there are dates, there are quotations. It's as if you're telling the perceiver what to perceive.
Well, I felt that none of us can look on that now. We weren't there, unless you are a survivor. That there's a link between a survivor and these images that no one else can have. So to me, I am looking at it from afar. And I use the words to make it real, to make it a specific place, a specific event, an undeniable situation. that's what I try to do with the words and the quotes. If I don't have words from that specific event that I can use, for example, in the Stroop report, Ghetto Child Stroop report, that first page of the Stroop report says the Jewish quarter of Warsaw is no more. I was given one of the actual reports at the Pentagon archives, and or maybe it was the Library of Congress in Washington. I'm not sure. But when it was put in my hands, I thought I could not believe I was holding the actual document. There are two of them that exist, three perhaps. General Stroop made them for himself and two other generals. He was very proud of the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto. He was responsible for it, he was put in charge of it, and he succeeded. He made this report, and there are at least 26 or more photographs in there. So I had all the photographs, I had the front page, I had the entire book in my hand. And I thought that was important to catch. There are other images I'm interested in too, where I don't have words specifically tied to them, so I tried to find them from the Bible. My husband's very, very helpful that way. He has an Orthodox background and he remembers everything. So the parting lodge has a quote from the book of Samuel, and it's the story of Jonathan and David. And the words come right from Jonathan and David.
This is Lynne Sandman with Muriel Nesny at the Susanna Brauer Gallery in Chicago. Muriel, I can't thank you enough for joining us, and I hope everybody gets a chance to see your work. And if you would like more details, please contact the gallery. Thank you for joining us on Focus. Shalom.